Hey everybody, this is Geneva of Genevas Closet Talk Show. Please make sure you like and share this video and subscribe to Genevas Closet if you haven't already done so right here on YouTube. And you can follow me on Facebook at Genevas Closet. And you can email me at genevascloset22@gmail.com. Now, let's get into the news. What do we really know about Diddy's, Sean Combs, Diddy Daddy, whatever? What do we really know about his mom and dad? Beside his mom's name being Janice, and we know she loves to wear blonde wigs, and they said something about her used to being a model or something back in the day. We are going to get into that. And when it comes to his father, Melvin, we heard that he was killed when Diddy was 2 years old. And just recently from Gene Deal and I think some others, we've been hearing that the reason why Diddy's father, Melvin, was killed was because he was a snitch. Well, how true is that? But we're going to get into it because I found some articles and I found some things. And so we're going to start with his dad first. Okay, now let's get into a little bit of Harlem, New York history so you can better understand how things went. And there are movies that I like to draw from when I get to this particular part, and that is Hoolum. I don't know if you've seen Hoolum with Lawrence Fishburne, Cicely Tyson, and Vanessa Williams. And I don't know if you've seen American Gangster with Denzel Washington. But when we are talking about these specific people, some of these people, those are the movies where you can pull from. Well, back in 1912, Madam Queenie immigrated to Harlem during the Harlem Renaissance, and she flipped drug money for the number game. So she was out there in Harlem doing her thing in the early 1900s, black woman with the number game. And her driver, principal lieutenant, and the one running the show was Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. Well, Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson got a driver, and soon enough, right-hand man, and that was Frank Lucas. Well, Frank Lucas does his thing and builds his money, and soon his driver becomes Diddy's father, Melvin Combs, or at least that's how they say the story goes. Now we are fast forwarding. It is the early 70s, and Melvin Earl Combs is out there hustling, making his money and doing his thing. And this is where the first bit of information I found came from. This is some type of article or message or something, and it is entitled, He Said, She Said, Melvin Combs, dated for April 19th, 2014. And it says on here, RayesR44@AOL.com said, now check this out, Braham or Braham, whatever, entered the house. Melvin Combs, who was known to the officers, arrived at the same location carrying a bag. Melvin entered the house and not long after left carrying a different bag. The surveillance officers relayed their observations to the supervisor, who was still en route to that location. But the supervisor was reluctant to authorize the arrest of Melvin Combs based on the observations. Melvin Combs was permitted to drive away from the area with his drugs. The next person to arrive at the house was Walter Grant, who did exactly what Melvin did by entering the house with a soft vinyl black bag. A short time later, Grant left the house and left the area in his Lincoln. By this time, other surveillance officers and the supervisor took up positions near the house. Walter Grant drove his car a safe distance away when, in the vicinity of a Bronx highway, his vehicle was stopped by the officers. The black bag contained 4.5 kilos of heroin, and Grant was placed under arrest. At the same time, back at the house, others showed up at the house, leaving with bags and arrested carrying heroin. A search warrant was executed for the house, and other persons was arrested as well as a significant amount of heroin. All of the arrested at some point tried to figure out how the police were tipped off and who ratted them out. The conclusion was the only person involved in this conspiracy who knew all the players and the intricate secrets had to be Melvin Combs, simply because he was there, got his drugs, and was able to leave without being arrested. The rest is history. I know because I was there for these surveillances and arrests. Now, I just want to make mention that you will be hearing some key names that I'll be mentioning a few times during this video, and that is Walter Grant and Willie Abraham. So make sure you check out those names. Now, getting back to what I just read. Ooh-wee. Now, when it said at the end that I was there for the surveillances and arrest, so this must be an officer then. It has to be some type of officer. If they're saying that they were there, they remember everything, and they remember exactly what took place as far as the officers and who didn't get arrested, then it had to have been some police. Remember I told you to watch out for the name Willie Abraham? Well, I found a court case for Willie Abraham, and it says Matter of Abraham versus Court of Appeals of the State of New York. Electronic and visual surveillance conducted by the New York Joint Task Force between September 28, 1971 and December 15, 1971 disclosed that petitioners and others were part of a large wholesale narcotics distribution organization operating in New York City, Westchester County, and New Jersey. On the morning of December 15, 1971, petitioners Willie Abraham, Margaret Logan, and Walter Grant, remember that name, were observed entering the Bronx, New York residence of petitioner Robert Hoke and his wife Lily, carrying empty shopping bags, or in Grant's case, with a collapsed suitcase. When they departed, Abraham, Logan, and Grant left with their once empty receptacles filled. They were then followed to different distribution points where they were arrested. Searches conducted incident to the arrest revealed that they each had over 1 pound of heroin in their possession. A subsequent search of the Hoke residence produced large amounts of narcotics, money, weapons, and drug packaging materials. On or about December 15, 1971, Willie Abraham, a.k.a. JC, Walter Grant, Margaret Logan, and Robert Hoke did distribute and possess with intent to distribute a total of 8.5 kilograms of heroin, hydrochloride, and in addition did obtain $70,000 income and resources from prior heroin distributions. On December 28, 1971, less than 2 weeks later, petitioners were indicted by the Bronx County Grand Jury, which, by 5 indictments, charged petitioners and Lily Hoke with criminal possession of a dangerous drug in the first degree. The indictments also charged petitioner Abraham with 2 counts of attempted murder, 2 counts of reckless endangerment in the first degree, and possession of a weapon, and petitioner Hoke and his wife Lily Hoke with 2 counts each of possession of a weapon and criminally using drug paraphernalia in the second degree. Remember the court case that I just read, and it mentioned that raids had took place in Bronx and Westchester? Well, here go an article from December 16th, 1971 at that same time, and it says Bronx and Westchester raids net $6 million in uncut heroin. The police fired a half-dozen shots in a Bronx chase yesterday and seized a man with 3 kilograms of heroin on the front seat of his car to bring to a climax a joint Bronx-Westchester County crackdown on narcotics peddlers. District Attorneys Burton B. Roberts of the Bronx and Carl whatever of Westchester said last night that a series of raids still continuing has so far netted uncut heroin valued at more than $6 million plus 12 suspects, including major dealers. Both district attorneys, who have been working since August with a large task force of city, state, and federal officials, said that their major weapon was court-ordered wiretaps. The 2 prosecutors said that raids November 24th, which were not publicized yesterday, led to the following seizures: about 12.5 kilos, 27.5 pounds of uncut heroin, and 1 kilo sealed bags, just like it comes from the importer, of which 9 kilograms were seized yesterday with a total street value of more than $6 million. A total of $70,000 in cash, of which $40,000 was found at 430 Yonkers when Eric Holder, 32, was arrested November 24th, and $30,000 was found yesterday at 461 Olmsted Avenue in the East Bronx, described as a major headquarters for dealers. 3 pistols and a rifle at 1972 Lincoln and Continental, and 4 1971 and 1972 Cadillacs. Willie J.C. Abraham of 1409 Prospect Avenue, the Bronx, described by Mr. Roberts as the prime suspect, drew the police fire in yesterday's automobile chase, but He was not hit. The chase started, Mr. Roberts said, when Mr. Abraham tried to run down two plainclothes men who approached his car, and ended at Harmony and Castle Hill Avenues when his oar ran into a fence. Here's the real information you all have been looking for. Who killed Melvin Earl Combs? What exactly happened to him? Well, what I have here appears to be a confession. A man confessing to knowing what actually happened to Melvin Earl Combs. So let me read it to you. I know who killed Melvin, he says, his face weary, but relieved as he speaks on Melvin's death publicly for the first time. He was a friend of mine, friend of Melvin's too. Helton was sent to Lewisburg Federal Prison in 1972 on a drug conviction. There he met up with an old friend, Walter Grant. Grant was the ex-school teacher from Mount Vernon, who was Willie Abraham's right-hand man. Walter told me that he parked his car on 106 and Central Park West and then took a cab to the Gold Lounge, a little further downtown. Then he called Melvin and told him to come pick him up. Melvin had no idea what was about to happen. Melvin picked him up and Grant told him to drive him to his car, told him to pull up and park right behind his car. Helton holds up his hand, makes a gun with his finger, thumb and forefinger, and holds it to his temple. He told me he took out his piece and said, Melvin, you got this coming to you. And that was it. Shot him dead. Got out of his car, got into his own car, and peeled out. According to Helton, Grant was convinced that Melvin had either ratted out his crew after his arrest or planned to. Frank Lucas believes that was just chatter about Melvin's arrest that led to his death. I think someone shot their mouth off about something they didn't know what they were talking about. People were just imagining things and talking crazy. Got him killed. I need to add to this confession because this makes me remember something that Gene Deal said. You remember Gene Deal? He's all on YouTube, all on social media. I think he was Diddy's former bodyguard. But I remember him speaking on Melvin Combs' death and him saying that the person that killed him was his friend. And he was at the funeral holding the casket and crying just as hard as everybody else. And now reading this supposed confession, this man Helton is saying that Walter Grant, which was Melvin's friend, is the one who killed him. So let's back up and then get to everything that I've read to you today. So the first thing that I read to you was someone giving their account on Melvin going to pick up drugs and then Walter Grant going right after him, but him being arrested, but Melvin not being arrested. Now, I think that it sounds like that could have been an officer telling that information, but I'm not sure. But what I'm missing or what I don't have information about is apparently before all of this happened, Melvin Earl Combs was arrested for something. And that's where they feel like, or that's where Willie Abraham and Walter Grant and a lot of people felt like it was that very first arrest that a deal was made between him and the police. And then they're feeling like because of that, then he went and picked up drugs. Didn't get arrested. Then Walter went and picked up drugs. He got arrested. And then people's homes ended up being raided. Based on what I read, it said from September to December of 1971, surveillance cameras were watching the drug dealers. And then on December 15th, if I'm not mistaken, that's when homes, December 15th, 16th, that's when homes were being raided and people were arrested. And then on December 28th, that's when they were indicted. I think they said 14 or 15 people were indicted, which included Willie Abraham and Walter Grant. Now, Willie Abraham was already facing 15 years. If I'm not mistaken, all of them were facing 15 years in jail. So I'm pretty sure they did want to know who was saying what and were they going to be there to confess. On January 26, 1972, Melvin Earl Combs was shot dead in his car. Now, this is less than a month from the time that Walter Grant, Willie Abraham, and the rest of the people were indicted. Less than a month, 2 days from it being a month, is when Melvin Earl Combs was killed. So yes, they definitely thought that he had something to do with it. When Melvin Earl Combs was killed, he was 33 going on 34 years old. Diddy was 2 years and 2 months, and his sister, Keisha Combs, was 4 months old. Here's a little bit more information about Melvin Combs' death. This is an article dated for February 24th, 1973, 1 year and a month after Melvin was killed. And it says 10 found guilty of heroin charge. 7 men and 3 women were found guilty here yesterday of participation in an extensive conspiracy that distributed $5 million a year in heroin at the wholesale level in Harlem and Bronx and Westchester County. The key defendant in the federal court trial was Willie Abraham, a 42-year-old bar manager identified as the conspiracy leader, whose name is on a police department list of the 100 major narcotics violators in the city. Abraham, who was sentenced to 5 years for selling heroin in 1963, now faces a mandatory minimum of 20 years to a maximum of life in prison for conviction as the organizer of the conspiracy. Each of the other defendants in the conspiracy case could face up to 15 years in prison when the sentences are imposed by the judge. On April 25th, the 10 defendants were found guilty by a jury of 5 men and 7 women after 10 hours of deliberations that were spread over 2 days at the end of a 7-week trial. W. Cullen McDonald, the prosecutor, told Judge Bryan after the verdict that detectives believed that the 1972 murder of Melvin Combs, a co-conspirator in the case, might ultimately be traced to members of the heroin distributing conspiracy. Co-conspirators' home were raided in 1971 after Combs had been arrested in possession of heroin and $45,000 in cash. The principal evidence in the trial included wiretaps and testimony by federal agents who had maintained surveillance of the conspirators before arresting them. 3 of Abraham's principal associates convicted in the case were Robert Hoke of Bronx, Walter Grant of Mount Vernon, New York, and Errol Holder of Yonkers. Okay, so I was looking for the information and I just read it about Melvin Combs being arrested. So they didn't give an exact date, but they definitely mentioned about him being arrested. So let's try to put this whole story together. So sometime in 1971, I'm assuming before August of 1971, Melvin Combs was arrested. He was popped with some heroin and $45,000 cash. He must have went and talked to the police and then made some type of agreement that he was going to snitch or work with them, because then they stated in August is when the police basically took on this case in 1971, and then from September to December of 1971 they had surveillance watching Abraham, Willie, and the rest of the drug dealers. And then on December 15th, 16th, all in 1971, the homes are being raided. But even before that, Melvin must have did something where I'm assuming he set this situation up. And then he said, I'm going to go in the house and then I'm going to pick up some drugs. And then after me, Walter Grant and some other people are going to go in there and pick some drugs up. So then they knew not to arrest Melvin, but to arrest Walter and the rest of the people. So I'm assuming that whole thing had to have been a setup, just the way that it went. And then on December 15th, 16th, homes were being raided. People got arrested. And then on December 28th, 1971, Walter Grant, Abraham, they were all indicted with several other people. And Willie Abraham, he already had some other things going on, because they end up hitting him with murder charges and stuff. So he already has some other court cases and things going on. So I know he was just not feeling this whole situation. Now, I'm assuming that after Walter Grant and Willie Abraham and everyone else was arrested, a conversation was had. And they said, okay, so Melvin must have had something to do with this. So I don't know if he planned on going in there to confess. He planned on giving some type of testimony or something, but we got to get rid of him. And since Walter Grant was the closest to him, you heard how the story went. Walter called him on 106 Central and West, said, I need you to come and pick me up, take me to my car, took him to his car, took out his gun, and shot and killed him, based on how the story went. I read this earlier, but I want to read it again. A task force of federal, state, and local cops smashed the ring in a series of raids in December 1971 as the result of information obtained through court-approved wiretaps on another big-time narcotics dealer's phone. The dealer, Melvin Combs, 31. Now, I was wondering when I read this, was it court-approved wiretaps that Melvin approved of himself, or were these court-approved wiretaps that Melvin didn't know about? When you go to findagrave.com for Melvin Combs, the part that they wrote for him, I found interesting. Listen to this. Melvin Earl Combs was an associate of notorious New York City drug lord Frank Lucas. Combs, at 33, was fatally gunned down in 1972 after a failed drug deal due to being mistaken for a police informant. I said, I wonder who wrote that. And were they trying to hide something? They didn't want us to know something with that bit of information. After reading everything and putting the whole story together now, doesn't it make more sense why they are putting Diddy with his father as far as being a snitch? Because Melvin was hustling, selling his drugs, living his life, doing his thing, and he was good until he got caught up. And then talks were had, and I'm assuming that the police didn't really want him. They knew that he was working with some heavy hitters, and they wanted those heavy hitters, and Melvin was willing to give up the heavy hitters, which ultimately caused his demise. Now, when it goes to Diddy, Diddy is out there having sex parties, doing his drugs and whatever else he's doing. He's living his life. He's doing his thing. He's good. And then he gets caught up. And I don't know if the police really want him. I mean, maybe they do, but maybe they know that there's some heavy hitters behind him that they really want. Is Diddy willing to give up the heavy hitters to stop himself from going to jail just like his father tried to do? Inquiring minds is waiting to find out. Make sure you stay tuned for the next video because we're not done. There's actually more to Melvin Combs' story. You're like, what? There's more to the story? What more could it be? I'm telling you, there's more to the story, and we haven't even gotten into his mama, Janice, yet. Because after I did my research, I come to find out, I think that there's a few things that they have been trying to keep from us, Diddy and his family, some information that they've been trying to keep hidden. Well, we're going to put it out there. And then I would really love to know what you think. Do you really think that Melvin was a snitch? Do you think that Diddy could possibly be a snitch if his father was one or not? I don't know. What do you think? And then Frank Lucas said that Melvin got killed for nothing, basically, that people were running their mouths off and making up stories. Do you believe that? And don't you remember at the beginning of this video, I mentioned that there was someone there who said that they seen Melvin get the drugs, leave, didn't get arrested, but everyone else got arrested. And I said that I felt like that could have been a police. Do you think that that was the police? Who do you think it is? I would love to know your opinion. I would like to know how you all feel about this situation, and while you are letting me know, could you please like and share this video and subscribe to Genevas Closet if you haven't already done so right here on YouTube. And you can follow me on Facebook at Genevas Closet, and you can email me at genevascloset22@gmail.com. You all have a fabulous day, and I will talk to you later. Bye.